You've probably been told to follow your intuition, to look inside of you if you want to change your life or the world. But has anyone ever taught you how to do that? In my experience, we've actually been taught the opposite. I remember when my intuition first clicked for me. I was literally doing cartwheels on a beach off the side of the Pacific Coast Highway in California. My partner and I had just fearfully scaled the side of a cliff in our bare feet, only to find ourselves all alone watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. We were madly in love, talking about marriage, road tripping around the country for the month, and I was 8 months into running my own business at 24 years old. All of my wild dreams were coming true, and it was one of those moments where you look out at the world and you almost feel a twinge of fear, as you hope it doesn't all get taken away, and you wonder, how did I get here? Flashback several years earlier, and the story was quite different. I was crying in an office room that looked more like a closet, being led into yet another mind game in the world of corporate consulting. The dream job that I'd worked towards for the last decade, the one that I wanted so badly to love and excel at, turned out to be one of my worst nightmares. I was less than a year in with no backup plan in place, feeling unhappy and hopeless, when I realized that as much as I hated where I was, this job that I was in, the thing that I actually feared the most was quitting. This was the first instance in a theme of realizing that the thing that I usually wanted the most was also the thing that I usually feared doing the most. A few years later, after leaving that job and experiencing a whole new world of freedom, I found that urge again. This time, it was to move across the country to a city I had never been to before where I knew no one. I'd been feeling stuck where I was, but fearful to move forward into the unknown, so I drummed up that trust, and then I followed that urge again. And as you can imagine, this wasn't the last time this feeling came up. The same mixture of curiosity and fear overcame me the morning that I realized it was time to leave my comfortable, stable corporate job to start my own more fulfilling business. And again, when my now fiance asked me on a date, despite the fact that he was leaving the country in a few short months. And again, when we were climbing down that cliff on the side of the Pacific Coast Highway. It was in that moment on that beach that I realized I'd been following my intuition all along. But the reason it was so hard to identify it was because the voice of my intuition felt an awful lot like the voice of fear. Now, if you're anything like me, you've probably been given one of two guidances when it comes to fear. Some of you have been told to just do it. Take the plunge, rip it off like a Band-Aid, close your eyes, and jump. And others of you, probably a bit more implicitly, have learned to avoid it. You've been told to slow down, use your head, and think through the logical side of things. And while there's nothing wrong with either of those mentalities, I promise you there is an approach that will serve you more. And that is what I realized that day on the beach. As I looked around and realized how everything had weirdly clicked into place, not to say that it was perfect or easy, but to say that that big, bold, fulfilling life that I had been craving was there, I realized all of that came from the opposite side of my fear. It came from a place of following my fear gracefully, learning to experience it, talk about it, and live with it, not avoid or deny or try to close my eyes and jump. It was in all of those little moments, like talking to my boss, or signing the lease, going on the date, and saying yes, that I was learning to make friends with my fear. I was getting so comfortable with that concoction of curiosity and worry that I was almost seeking it out. And because that feeling wasn't so foreign to me anymore, that fear was actually acting as my compass instead. Now, there's something they don't tell us about fear, and that is fear actually is what lives on the other side of our comfort zone. It actually creates the comfort zone walls. And our comfort zone, while comfortable to stay in for a moment or two, is actually quite uncomfortable when we overstay our welcome. You've probably found yourself staying too long at a friend's house or a party, and you know that feeling, kind of like an antsiness to get going, right? Well, the same is true when you stay too long in your comfort zone. But the reason you don't make the move is because, unlike your friend's house, leaving your comfort zone requires you to live with fear. And a lot of us don't have a very positive perception of what fear is. We think danger or failure or even a threat to our safety. And our body actually takes over as a natural response to protect us. Our mind will start to replay all of those smart comments we've heard our friends and parents and teachers say over the years. Things like, have you thought through that? Do you have a backup plan? Are you sure? And because that feeling is so foreign to us, we actually shut down, we retreat, and we stay where we're at, which is why we're here. Because all big ideas, all of the things in your life that are worthwhile, the things that the world will require you to step up and do and make change that impacts the whole and moves the whole forward, all of that lives on the other side of your fear. It'll require you to experience your fear and experience it frequently. And because I know we sit here today wanting to live those big, bold lives, lives that impact yourselves, others, and the world, the greatest gift that I can give to you is that of making friends with your fear, because it's gonna be a valuable partner, an asset even, on your journey. Now, before I leave here today, I wanna tell you about Chase. Chase was a client of mine who experienced a feeling that a lot of us struggle with, the feeling that he was meant for more. Now, usually, this feeling is accompanied by the feeling of guilt. He couldn't understand why he couldn't just be grateful for all that he already had. A good job, caring family, loving wife. His life was good, but yet he couldn't shake that feeling that he was meant to do more, be more, help more. So as you can imagine, a lot of what Chase and I did together was around identifying what more meant to him, where his intuition was probing him to step out of his comfort zone. This was more difficult than we realized because Chase didn't actually know what his intuition was or how to identify it. And so we started by identifying some of his biggest fears instead. We poked holes and learned to use his fear as a way to identify those most impactful next steps, the places where his intuition was probing him to step out. At first, this started small. He started going to acting classes for fun, using them as a way to practice following through and trusting in situations where fear was present, proving to himself that it was okay to listen and it was okay to fear. After a few months together, he had completely pivoted his path. He had taken some time to go travel abroad alone, came back and was leaning into more expansive friendships. And he made a risky move that landed him in a career that was more impactful and fulfilling than he ever had imagined possible. As he consistently applied the approach of leaning into his fear, he started to see the results snowball, and his life started to change exponentially. No longer was he questioning if he was meant for more, because he already knew he was. He was living it. And all of that started because he learned to make friends with his fear. A lot of these ground level steps, the things that feel so small at first, are really setting us up for something so much bigger. And taking the time to learn a new navigation system now, one that is led by fear rather than one that avoids it, will set you up for a lifetime full of more fulfillment, freedom, and impact than you can ever imagine. Which is why I ask, when you leave here today, rather than going back to those same old tasks, shifting your thoughts when those fearful feelings come up in your body, and just hoping you'll be the one to live those impactful lives, ask yourself, where is fear popping up the most for me? And let that question, that feeling, be your compass instead. Thank you.